Everyone thinks they know how the Boleyn story ends. Anne Boleyn, the dazzling younger sister, becomes queen, changes the religion of a kingdom, gives birth to Elizabeth I, and dies on the scaffold. Mary Boleyn, the elder sister, is the other Boleyn girl, the discarded mistress, the woman history shrugs at and walks past. We're told Anne is the tragic star. Mary is the footnote. Anne lost her head. Mary lost her reputation. And that's where, in most people's minds, the story stops. But what if I told you that's not where it ends at all? What if the sister history forgot actually won the royal game? Because hidden right in front of us is a truth that almost no one talks about. While Anne's bloodline died with her, Mary Boleyn's blood did something extraordinary. It survived. It spread. It climbed. It moved quietly through the centuries, through courtiers and countesses, earls and duchesses, until one day it walked into Westminster Abbey wearing a crown. Today, the blood of Mary Boleyn flows in Queen Elizabeth II's line and in the veins of King Charles III himself. The forgotten sister, the woman dismissed as a royal plaything, has more living power in the modern monarchy than the queen who stole her place. Tonight, on Hidden Crowns, we're going to follow that bloodline, from a disgraced mistress who chose love over power to the throne room of a modern king. We'll ask, how did Mary Boleyn, the sister, written off as a scandal, end up as the true royal matriarch? Why did Anne die for a crown that her descendants never wore, while Mary, stripped of everything, won the longest game of all? Legacy? By the end of this story, you may never look at Tudor history or the royal family the same way again. Before we begin, remember to like this video and subscribe to Hidden Crowns, because some of the most explosive truths in history have been hiding in plain sight, quietly waiting in the family trees. To understand Mary's victory, we first have to understand her defeat. Mary Boleyn was probably born around 1499, the eldest surviving child of Thomas Boleyn and Elizabeth Howard, a girl born into a family on the rise. Her father was sharp, educated, relentless, a courtier who knew how to make himself useful to kings. Her mother came from the powerful Howard dynasty. Ambition flowed in Mary's veins before she ever knew what the word meant. But she was still only a daughter. And in that world, daughters were not heirs. They were assets. Mary grew up at Hever Castle, learning all the skills expected of a high-born Tudor girl: music, dancing, needlework, French, courtly charm. From the beginning, she was being prepared not for a life, but for a role. Around 1514, barely in her teens, she was sent abroad to France. There, she served Princess Mary Tudor, then Queen Claude. And somewhere in those glittering French courts, Mary Boleyn's name began to darken. The French King Francis I would later brag crudely that he had known her, calling her a great whore, the most infamous of all. Was that true, or swaggering gossip? We will never fully know. But in the brutal calculus of court reputation, truth didn't matter. A king's laughter was enough to stain her name. When Mary returned to England, she was damaged goods in a world that prized a woman's chastity more than her character. The Boleyns had a problem. How do you salvage a girl whom a king has already turned into a joke? The answer was simple and ruthless. You marry her. Quickly, respectably, strategically. On 4 February 1520, Mary Boleyn married William Carey, a well-connected but not overly wealthy gentleman of the king's privy chamber, and a distant cousin of Henry VIII. To the outside world, it looked like a solid match. To the Boleyns, it was damage control. To William Carey, it was an opportunity. Because Mary now served as a lady-in-waiting to Queen Catherine of Aragon, and a wife in the Queen's household was one step away from the king's gaze. Carey didn't just gain a bride, he gained a position, a pretty, well-born wife placed exactly where royal favor might fall. And in a few short years, favor did fall. Not on Carey, on Mary. The exact moment Henry VIII first looked at Mary Boleyn as more than a court ornament is lost to time. But by 1522, the whispers were loud. Mary took part in the famous Chateau Vert pageant, where 8 ladies played virtues for the king. Anne Boleyn was perseverance. Mary might have dazzled in a similar role. Soon after, Henry began an affair with her. We don't know how long it lasted. We don't know if she resisted, or if she was flattered, or simply resigned. We don't have her letters, her diary, her side of the story. What we do have are patterns. Henry took mistresses the way other men took wine, but his affairs were rarely harmless. They left women with reputations ruined and futures compromised, while the men around them found ways to benefit. William Carey, Mary's husband, did not storm out of court. He did not challenge the king. He did not remove his wife from danger. Instead, as Mary's liaison with Henry unfolded, Carey's fortunes rose. He was showered with offices, grants, and royal favor in the very years his wife was the king's mistress. Was he terrified and resigned, or quietly calculating? We will never truly know. What we do know is that Mary paid the price, and Carey got the rewards. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the affair ended. Henry's attention shifted, and it shifted to a new target with a familiar surname: Anne Boleyn. Mary's younger sister, sharper, fiercer, determined never to be discarded as easily as Mary had been. Anne refused to be just another mistress. She wanted a crown, and Henry, drunk on desire and ego, was willing to destroy the world to give it to her. In the great drama that followed, the great matter, the break with Rome, the execution of a queen, Mary Boleyn faded to the edges of the story. She became what history still calls her, the other Boleyn girl, the sister who came first and then was forgotten. But her story wasn't over. It was only retreating underground, into the quiet, invisible place where bloodlines wait. When Mary's husband, William Carey, died suddenly of sweating sickness in 1528, the illusion of security shattered. For all the rewards he'd received, he had left Mary in debt. She had 2 small children, Catherine and Henry, and almost no means to support them. Mary had been used by a king, sacrificed by a husband, and now abandoned by fortune. And yet, someone did step in. Not Henry, not her father, not William Carey's relatives. It was Anne Boleyn, now Henry's great passion, the woman for whom he was overturning church and crown. Anne secured a pension for her sister and took Mary's son, Henry Carey, into her care for his education. Think about the irony. The boy whose mother had been Henry's mistress was now being raised and groomed under the protection of Henry's future queen. The Boleyn web was tightening. Mary, widowed and vulnerable, had every reason to cling to court. To do what women of her rank were meant to do: accept the decisions made for her, play her role, obey. But instead, she did something no one expected. In 1534, Mary Boleyn committed the one act of rebellion her world could not forgive. She married for love. Her new husband was William Stafford, a soldier and a gentleman, but a younger son with little money and few prospects. To the Boleyns, he was beneath her. To Mary, he was worth everything. The marriage was done in secret. When it was discovered, the reaction was swift and vicious. Anne was furious. Their uncle, Thomas Howard, was furious. The king was displeased. Mary was cut off from court, from financial support, from the family that had used her and now disowned her. Her status went from former royal mistress to disgraced nobody almost overnight. And yet, in one of the few letters we have in her own words, Mary told Thomas Cromwell, "I would rather beg my bread with him than be the greatest queen in Christendom." I would rather beg my bread with him than be the greatest queen in Christendom. That sentence is a bomb. In one line, Mary Boleyn threw away the entire value system of her world. Power, rank, royal favor? She had lived close enough to all of it to see what it cost. She had watched Henry grow tired of women he once adored. She had watched her sister gamble with her life for a crown. She had watched her own body turned into a bargaining chip, her name traded for her husband's profit. And she chose a man who could give her none of that, only himself. Mary Boleyn stepped off the board. She walked away from the game everyone else was still killing themselves to win. To her family, it looked like surrender. But history would prove that it was the most powerful move she ever made. We know what happened next to Anne Boleyn. Her meteoric rise dazzled Europe. She became Henry's obsession, his reason for breaking with Rome. She gave him a daughter, Elizabeth. She miscarried sons. Then, in 1536, the wheel turned. Accusations of adultery, treason, incest, a trial scripted for a foregone conclusion. Anne was executed on the scaffold, her brother with her, her name stained in the eyes of her enemies, her life cut short at the height of her fame. She left behind one child, one fragile life, Princess Elizabeth. A girl declared illegitimate after her mother's fall, pushed aside by half-siblings, living on the edge of danger through the reigns of Edward VI and Mary I, and then finally seizing the throne as Elizabeth I. Elizabeth would become one of England's greatest monarchs, but she never married. She never had children. Anne Boleyn's direct royal line ended with that one brilliant, solitary queen. Meanwhile, far from court, Mary Boleyn was living out a life that no one thought was important enough to record in detail. No grand portraits, no chronicles of her words, no ambassadors writing breathless dispatches about her. She lived quietly with William Stafford, probably in the countryside, unknown, unseen. To her ambitious relatives, this looked like a failure. She had thrown away her chance to remain near the crown. But Mary was doing something else, something far more dangerous, far more enduring. She was raising children. Her two Carey children, Catherine and Henry, survived. They grew. They married. They had children of their own. Mary wasn't building a reign. She was building a bloodline. And that bloodline was about to weave itself through the highest ranks of English nobility for centuries to come. Let's follow the line Mary Boleyn through her eldest daughter, Catherine Carey, who married Sir Francis Knollys. Their daughter, Lettice Knollys, carried the bloodline forward into the intricate and glittering web of the English aristocracy, where it intertwined with the great noble families of England and continued its quiet ascent through the centuries. Catherine Carey served as a maid of honor and later became chief lady of the bedchamber to her cousin, Queen Elizabeth I, Anne Boleyn's daughter. Think about that. The daughter of Mary Boleyn, the discarded sister, became the closest female attendant to Anne Boleyn's child. Side by side, day after day, in chambers and corridors, stood two different branches of the Boleyn legacy. Elizabeth, the queen who had survived scandal to claim a crown, and Catherine, the cousin whose quiet lineage would outlive the Tudors themselves. Catherine married Sir Francis Knollys. Together they had a large brood of children, politically connected, well married, with ties running deep into the nobility. One of their daughters, Lettice Knollys, would become the second wife of Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester, Elizabeth I's great favorite. Elizabeth was said to be enraged by the match. She felt betrayed, as if her own blood had taken something that belonged to her. But what's fascinating is this. While Elizabeth's temper cooled and blazed within a single lifetime, Mary Boleyn's descendants were quietly sinking roots. Generation after generation, the descendants of Catherine Carey intermarried with powerful families, the Knollys, the Wests, the Devereux, and beyond. At some point, those lines connected with the Boleyn family, Scottish aristocrats with deep old roots. From there, they led directly to Elizabeth Boleyn, better known as the Queen Mother, which means that Queen Elizabeth II was a direct descendant of Mary Boleyn through Catherine Carey. And if Elizabeth II carried Mary's blood, so too does her son, King Charles III. Let that sink in. Anne Boleyn won a crown and lost her life. Her only child died childless. Mary Boleyn lost everything: the king's favor, courtly status, family support, and chose a quiet life with a man who could offer her no crown at all. But today, when King Charles III opens Parliament, when he stands on a balcony and waves to the crowds, he does so with the blood of Mary Boleyn flowing in his veins. The sister, written off as a scandal, as a cautionary tale, as a prelude to someone else's story, has become, in the long run, the true matriarch of the modern monarchy. So, who really won the Boleyn War? The brilliant younger sister, who reached higher than anyone thought possible, became queen and died for it, leaving behind a dazzling but childless legacy? Or the elder sister, who stumbled, fell, was used, judged, and cast aside, and then quietly walked away from the game everyone else was still desperate to play? History has always been obsessed with Anne, the doomed queen, the witch, the victim, the heroine, whatever story you prefer. Mary is harder to sell. She doesn't die dramatically. She doesn't change the church. She doesn't scream on the scaffold. She marries, she loves, she disappears, and yet, somehow, she wins. Because in the end, what is the real measure of victory? A crown, a title, a reign carved into stone? Or a line of descendants that stretch beyond the fall of dynasties, beyond the Tudors, the Stuarts, the Hanoverians, into the House of Windsor itself? Every time you see images of Charles III, of William and Harry, of the late Queen Elizabeth II, you are looking at living proof that Mary Boleyn did not lose. She outlived her era in the one way that matters most to royal bloodlines: continuity. Not through power seized, but through children raised. Not through crowns torn from other people's heads, but through quiet survival. The other Boleyn girl became the one whose blood still sits on the throne. Strip away the coronations, the scandals, the court politics, and what are we left with? A woman who had every reason to be bitter, broken, and desperate for status, choosing instead a poor husband she loved over a rich world that had used her. A mother who bore children into a dangerous world, not knowing that centuries later those same bloodlines would inherit the crown that had once cost her sister her life. A sister who watched Anne fly too close to the sun, not with malice, but with the weary understanding of someone who had already been burned. Mary's story is not tidy. It is not saintly. She was not a perfect victim, and she was certainly no flawless heroine. She made mistakes. She benefited from power before she was destroyed by it. But in the end, she did something astonishing. She walked away. She chose love over rank. She chose obscurity over corruption. And though she died in relative quiet in 1543, somewhere in the English countryside, far from the court that had once defined her, her blood never stopped moving. It moved through Catherine and Henry Carey, through marriages and births and centuries of history, until it reached the House of Windsor. Mary didn't just survive Henry VIII, she outlived him, not in years, but in legacy. So what does all of this mean when we zoom out from the Tudor court to the big picture? It means that history loves loud stories, but lineage loves quiet ones. That the woman everyone dismissed as a royal misstep, a moral warning, a great and infamous whore in the words of her enemies, became, indirectly, the ancestress of some of the most respected monarchs in modern times. It means that sometimes stepping back from the fire is not cowardice, it's a strategy. And it forces us to ask, when we talk about who won in royal history, have we been looking at the wrong metrics all along? Is victory a glittering decade on the throne? Or 500 years of descendants carrying your blood into the future? Was Mary Boleyn really the loser of the family, or the one who understood, at a cost, that there is more than one way to win a royal war? We will never know what Mary herself believed in those last years with William Stafford. Did she have any idea what her children's children's children would become? Did she suspect that while her sister's story would be told and retold in tragedy, hers would unfold silently in bloodlines until it crowned a king? Or did she simply hold her children, choose her husband, and decide that, for once in her life, she belonged to herself? So now, I'll ask you, when you look at the modern British monarchy, at Charles III, at the late Queen, at the faces on stamps and coins, will you think of Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn, or of the quiet sister who walked away and somehow won everything that matters? Was Mary Boleyn a foolish girl ruined by kings, or the forgotten architect of a royal line that outlived them all? Tell me in the comments, who do you think truly won? Anne with her crown and her tragedy, or Mary with her exile and her descendants? And if this story changed the way you see the Tudors, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Hidden Crowns, because this is just one of many secrets that lie buried in royal blood. And next time, we'll pull on another hidden thread in the tapestry of history and see what unravels.